So here's what I have seen in my own self and also working with thousands of other people. And that is, most of the time when we open a business, we open it because we're good at something. And we say, hey, why should I give up? I'm bringing in this company X amount of revenue because I'm really, really good at this thing. Why don't I go open up my own?
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Jason Roberts is a charismatic national speaker and peak performance coach dedicated to mastering and teaching the formulas for success. Despite a challenging upbringing and being a college dropout, he has founded 11 companies, 10 of which generated over $1 million in their first year. His ventures have collectively brought in over $100 million in revenue. He's helped thousands of people grow and scale their businesses across various industries, including real estate investing, medical practices, insurance, and more. Jason is known for his expertise in scaling businesses to 7 and 8 figures within a year and has positively impacted over 20,000 people through speaking engagements and coaching sessions. He's also hosted numerous live and virtual events and masterminds, collaborating with top industry leaders to identify market trends and make strategic forecasts. You can learn from Jason's extensive experience and insights into why 90% of new businesses fail within the first 5 years and what the successful 10% do differently. He offers a 4-pillar model for business success and provides practical guidance on implementing these principles to achieve significant growth and scalability. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. I mean, this is going to be a great conversation, right? There's a lot of people who are listening who want to be entrepreneurs, but don't always know what they should be doing. And one of the reasons I have my podcast, and even in my intro, I even talk about how, more businesses have failed, and only my statistic, which sounds like it's older than what you have, was 33% about are in existence in 10 years. And I want to help change that too, because too many people have a dream and then it's dashed because they're not able to continue. So I think it's a great topic. But before we get into the actual conversation, I'd love for you to share your story of how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild story. A lot of luck, a lot of chance, a lot of hard work. But I as you mentioned in my bio, thank you for that, by the way. I grew up in a small farm town. I didn't have like entrepreneur mentors. I didn't have people that I really looked up to. My mom was a nurse, a beautiful woman, sacrificed everything. My dad bailed when I was 12. My brothers were younger, and so we grew up in a single mom environment with lots of love, but not a lot of money, not a lot of mentors, not a lot of things like that. And so when I was 18, my mom basically said, you either need to get a job or you need to go to college full time, one of the two, but you can't stay here. And so I did both. I enrolled in college and I got a job. My first job was at a collection agency, which for any of your listeners that haven't done that, a lot of good and bad. I mean, I don't know that anybody aspires to call people that are 6 months delinquent on their Discover card for the rest of their life, but it paid really well. And my first year there, I made like $70,000 collecting bills. And so as an 18-year-old kid enrolled in college full-time and working full-time, I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a lot of guidance, a lot of people in my life that were financially well off. And so, my 18-year-old thought was, 70 grand a year is better than the 40 grand a year that my friends that enrolled in Mizzou and are getting a 4-year degree and they're going to go away with $100,000 or $200,000 worth of student loan debt. I'm already making more than what they're going to make when they graduate 4 years from now, which might have been the wrong idea, might have been the right one. I don't know, but that was my thought. And so, I quit college and kept working there. But I remember walking into that place every day, and I know a lot of listeners can relate to this, but the golden handcuffs of corporate America, and that was, I walked in every day and I saw people that were 30 years old, 40 years old, 50, 60, 70 years old that were just working in this cubicle, this giant cubicle call center environment. And I thought, I don't know what God put me on this earth to do, but I don't think it was this. Like I think there's got to be something more for me than this. And so that's really what kind of started the journey. One of the guys that worked with me, he left and he got into the mortgage business and he did really well. And so I thought to myself, well, why don't I do that? You know, surely it'll be a lot more fun to help somebody buy their first house or acquire their first rental property or whatever it is than it is, you know, calling people with delinquent credit card bills. And so I called down to the state of Missouri. I asked them what it takes to open a mortgage company, and they sent me this big, thick packet. And after a couple of weeks of going through that, you know, granted, this was like 2000 at the time, drastically different landscape now. But at that time, the only two things that I didn't have as an 18-year-old to open, you know, to be licensed as a mortgage bank or company was $50,000 and cash reserves and $1 million surety bond. And after a couple phone calls to a couple insurance agents, the $1 million surety bond, while it sounded scary, was only a couple $1,000 to get a bond like that. And the other thing was the 50 grand that I just clearly did not have. So I spent the next 2 years saving up. I mean, I lived like a hermit, you know, at 20, 18, 19, 20 years old. All my friends are, you know, they're going out partying, they're doing whatever they're doing, college, the whole bit. And I'm working 50, 60 hours a week, staying home, saving up my money. And on April 15th, 2001, 2 weeks after my 21st birthday, I was an entrepreneur, right? I opened that company from the spare bedroom of my condo and realized real quick that there were a whole lot of things that I didn't know, but I didn't have a choice anymore. I had to figure them out. So that was kind of where things started. We grew from the spare bedroom in my condo to an office, from an office to a bigger office. And, you know, over a couple year period of time, we went from the spare bedroom in my condo to about 100 employees. We went from, you know, not knowing how to do that business at all to about $20 million a year in annual revenue. I did all the things that the super smart lawyers and accountants said to do, you know, finance things, lease things, build a house, have write-offs, you know, do all this stuff. And, you know, things appeared really, really good from the outside. And, but from the inside, you know, I was a slave to that business. I was there at 5:30 in the morning. I left at midnight. I know a lot of people can resonate with that. But when I ask people, like, why did you open a business to begin with? I get a lot of surface level answers like, well, I want to make more money, or I want this or I want that. But when we really drill it down, it almost always comes down to freedom, whether that's financial freedom, time freedom, life freedom. It's some form of freedom, which was the opposite of what I had. You know, I mean, it's nice to say we made millions of dollars, but what good is money if you have no life, no purpose, no meaning, no relationships, no health, you know, like all the things that really matter. But 2007 came and humbled me real fast. You know, like I said, we went from bringing in millions of dollars a month in revenue to being almost $100,000 a month cash flow negative, you know, pretty much overnight. And we went cash flow negative at that pace for about 2.5 years. You know, when you have an office that holds 100 people and all those expenses, just because the income stops coming in, that doesn't mean the expenses stop going out. And I found myself in a place where I had to make a decision to pay my own mortgage payment or the office rent. And I chose to pay the office rent because there was no job I was going to go get at that point that was going to support the life I had created. And I lost my own house to foreclosure. Missouri is a state that has deficiency judgment, which means if your $1 million house sells for 500 grand at the auction, you still owe that other $500,000. It's a judgment against you. And all at that same time, you know, the government kind of reformed how mortgage lending was done. And so NMLS is I don't know if you want to call it a law, but a new set of operating guidelines that you had to be in order to be licensed. And you can't have delinquencies, you can't have judgments, you can't have anything. So I had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Went from being a multimillionaire to essentially homeless in a 2.5 year period of time. So I share that not for sympathy or pity, but just to understand kind of my journey and the lessons that were learned, and good, bad. And, you know, I think part of the reason I'm here to be able to share things today is because I've just probably screwed up more than most people.
But I mean, we learn from our failures too, and then
100%.
Other people can learn from the stories, which is another reason why I love to have this podcast and have people on and sharing their expertise and what they've learned, because a lot of people can learn from other people's mistakes or successes, you know, whatever that might be,
Right.
but help them along, right? So
Absolutely.
in the bio, then I did mention too that you said 90% of new businesses fail within the first 5 years. I would
Yep.
love for you to talk about that. Again, my statistic, I guess, is probably older. But I would love for your, take on why are businesses failing at such a high percentage?
So here's what I have seen in my own self and also working with thousands of other people. And that is, most of the time when we open a business, we open it because we're good at something and we say, hey, why should I give up? I'm bringing in this company X amount of revenue because I'm really, really good at this thing. Why don't I go open up my own? One of the guys that I just started working with 4 or 5 months ago in a consulting capacity, he owns a construction company in Texas, and he's one man band. And he got into the trades as a journeyman, and he was brilliant carpenter, and he worked for a construction company, and he got paid his $30-$40 an hour, whatever it was, and said, why the heck should I do this when I could go do the whole thing? And those skills don't translate. You're if you've ever read the book The E-Myth, it's a really good parable of this situation about the baker. And I think about, I consulted a doctor in St. Louis, and he wanted to scale his business and he wanted to work himself out of it. He's working 80 hours a week. And every time I work with somebody new, they say, well, Jason, you just don't understand. You're not a doctor. Jason, you just don't understand. You're not a construction person. And I always respectfully say, no, you don't understand. I'm not trying to teach you how to be a better doctor because I don't know that. You do. And I'm not trying to teach you how to be a better carpenter because you know that. It's not because you're lacking carpentry skills that your carpentry business is failing. It's not because you're lacking doctor skills that your doctor practice isn't where you want it to be. It's because what you learned how to be an expert at was to be a doctor, and now you have a business that requires doctors to be there. And so I think one of the biggest things is that people just never got any understanding of how to make an actual business work, how to pay attention to your metrics, how to understand income and expenses, how to price things to make things work. And so, when I build a model for a new business, those are all things that the product is a small piece of it. But I think as newer entrepreneurs, or at least until we figure this out, we get married to the product and not necessarily the experience that we're providing for the customer.
Right. Well, and that's why I actually have the business I have. We do bookkeeping and payroll and sales tax and, compliance that helps with all the stuff that has to go to the government that most people are terrified, to do as well.
Sure.
But a lot of them often think too, like, well, I can't afford, when I start a business, I can't afford, professional help. I'm just going to do it all myself. And then they don't always know what they don't know. Right. And then if you miss something, you have these pretty hefty financial penalties that go along with it too, And so I think that's one of the things that happens too is, a lot of people, like you said, they have a talent or skill, but they don't understand all the other things that go into making the business run. And if you're a doctor or an attorney, most likely you didn't have really any classes on the business side of it. You had it just on, your specific skills. So, do you have any recommendations for someone who's starting, who's maybe thinking, well, I can't afford the help right now. I do have to do it myself until, I grow. But I don't know what I don't know. Like, what would you tell them?
So what I would say right off the bat is that I never had any formal business education either. Everything that I've learned has come either from mentors or from trial and error or a combination of both. And so, like, when I say model, like, one of my 4 pillars is model. And what I mean by that is, if you want to be the most successful construction company in Texas, find someone that owns a very successful construction company and model what they do. Like, we make this harder than it needs to be. And find somebody, if you want to be a national championship bodybuilder, find the guy that won last year or the guy that came in second or third, and find out, what do they do when they first wake up in the morning? How many hours do they sleep? What do they eat? How many times a day do they eat? Like, what is their model? And, one thing I did from early on, 18, 19 years old, is I read a lot of autobiographies. I read books on Carnegie, on Jack Welch, on Steve Jobs, on people and I started to see commonalities that the people that succeed have in common. And on accident, I just tried to start modeling those things. I would say for somebody that's just starting out that doesn't have the money to bring on a team, like, we're typically good at a couple of things. And so like I work with another guy in Texas that has a real estate investing company. They do a lot of properties. And I asked him, how much of your week would you say, how much of the hours in your week would you say you're spending in your unique genius zone, like the thing that you're God-given really, really good at? And he said, and every time the answer is the same, 80-90% of the time. And then I have them fill out this worksheet where they track it throughout the week. And then at the end of the week, they call me and they say, oh my God, Jason, you're never going to believe this. And I kind of laugh because I know it's coming. And they say, I'm probably spending 10 or 20% of my time doing the things that I'm brilliant at. I'm spending 80% of my time doing things that I'm not good at. And what happens when we do things that we're not good at? It takes us an exponentially long amount of, right? Like if you took me, like, I like cars, but I don't know how to rebuild an engine. So if you hire me at a mechanic shop and I'm your mechanic, I'll probably get the job done at the end of the day, but it's going to take me 6 months longer to do it than somebody. So were they really saving money by hiring me as a cheap mechanic because I didn't know what I was doing? You know what I mean? So I think there's so much value into looking at your business plan and saying, not viewing it necessarily as a cost of bringing somebody on, but as opportunity loss. And I think the main reason we do that isn't necessarily because we don't have the money, although that's the excuse that we give ourselves. It's because of fear, right? Like fear is what holds us all back. And so we're fear of failing, fear of not looking good. We have this belief system that, well, if I don't know how to do it, then if I don't know how to teach somebody how to do it, then I shouldn't hire. And these are all mistakes that I made along the way. If you look at like somebody like Henry Ford didn't necessarily know how to build engines. He didn't know really, he knew about cars, but he didn't know that much about cars. But one thing that Henry Ford was brilliant at was finding the people that knew the things at a high level that he didn't know and building a team of capable people. And I think we'd be surprised sometimes of the caliber of people that are out there that we could bring in, even on a part-time basis, to help us grow and scale our company.
Right. So what did you identify from, those 10% of the businesses who are doing really well? Like, what are their typical strategies or practices that they're implementing to help them succeed?
Sure. I think another one of the pillars that I talk about is metrics. What just some baseline metrics of how much marketing went out of the marketing that went out, how much response came in, out of the response that came in, how many appointments did we set, out of the appointments that we set, how many meaningful conversations do we have, out of meaningful conversations, how many offers did we make to our prospect or client, out of the offers that we made, how many got accepted. And it sounds crazy, but if I can get a business owner to track those things for a week or two, like a doctor, I can almost instantly diagnose where the problem is. But most business owners, especially newer business owners, or even not necessarily new time-wise, but ones that are struggling to get to where they want to go, if I ask them, what's your conversion rate on your marketing versus response? What's your conversion rate on your conversations versus like accepted clients? They have a general, I think it's pretty good. And then I instantly know that there's absolutely no tracking at all going on this. And business is a game of numbers. It's a scorecard. It's a math equation. It's not chance. It's not luck. It's not, in my opinion, it's not things that fall from the sky and fall into place. It's understanding where we're winning and where we're losing from a scorecard, and then working on the areas that we're failing. And the only way we can do that is if we're tracking those things, paying attention to them, evaluating them, creating a new approach, measuring the new approach, see if it works better than the old one, and dialing those things in a little bit at a time. And if we can move the needle 2 or 3% in this area, 2 or 3% in this area, 2 or 3% in this area, the end all result can be hundreds of thousands of dollars to our bottom line every year.
Right. Well, in the bio I mentioned, you said you have 4 pillars. So do you want to talk about, what all those pillars really are? I know you just started touching on them, but I would love to have you just give an overview of them all.
Sure. So the first one is model. And I talked about that a little bit, but it's like, if you want to be successful in anything, you need to have a recipe or blueprint or model. And what I mean by that is like, people get that confused with goals. I want to increase revenue. I want to do that. And that's not what I mean. What I mean is like, what does not you, but what does the business need to be doing on a daily basis in order to achieve the result that we set out to get? So like, what is our operating plan? What does the marketing department need to be doing? What does the sales department need to be doing, so that we're being proactively attacking business as opposed to responsive reacting? And many of the clients that I take in on a new basis, they're living in a very reactive. I'm sure many of you can resonate with this, but they're living in a reactive state. They're putting out fires once they come, as opposed to really understanding what those issues are and creating SOPs or policies or things that we're doing on a daily basis to avoid some of those problems, so we don't have to put out those fires next week and can operate a little more smoothly. Also, by model, though, I mean that, like, what are the like businesses that are winning big time? What are they doing that's working? And what can I implement along those paths? So that's the model part. Metrics is kind of what I just described, is understanding the tracking of it. So I bought a 94-bed assisted living facility 2.5 years ago. I've never been in the medical field. We bought it as a cash flow play and realized that we have 50 employees and 94 residents, and it's a business, but it's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I live in St. Louis and Michigan. So I go back and forth between St. Louis and Michigan. This business is in Milwaukee. So I had to figure out, how can I run, grow, scale this business that's 2 states away without me being there? And the metrics part was one of the most important sides of this, because when we bought it, it was completely full. And within 6 months, we had 11 vacancies. And no one knew why. And the team and the staff, we're doing everything the same as we always do. We don't know what's happening. I know from experience that can't be the case. The reason why and 11 vacancies at $4,000 a month per bed was $50,000 a month in revenue loss that we didn't even know how it happened. And so we quickly implemented metrics. And those metrics were, how many referrals are we getting per week of new residents? Out of those referrals that we get, how many of them are we doing an assessment on? Out of the assessments, how many are we accepting? Out of the ones that we were accepting, how many agreed to move in? Out of the ones that agreed to move in, how many actually landed? And out of the ones that landed, is billing and everything else okay? And so when we started measuring those things on a daily basis, within 3 months, we went from 11 vacancies back down to 0. And I know that sounds kind of elementary and simple, but where focus goes, energy flows. And we had the same thing with employees. I'm sure everybody listening that owns a business this last 2 or 3 years, especially since COVID, it's like people don't want to work. I mean, I 24 years I've been an entrepreneur. I've never experienced anything like this. Weekly, we get 100 resumes for our assisted living facility. We message all 100 of them via text and say, would you like to come in for an interview? Out of the 100 that applied, usually 30 to 40 confirm an interview date and time. And out of the 30 or 40 that confirm their interview date and time, usually 6 to 8 actually show up. And out of the 6 to 8 to show up, we hire 3 or 4. So like out of 100, we end up with 3 or 4. It's just crazy to me. So we had to do the same thing on the metric side with the employee side of the business. And that is, how many resumes did we get this week? Out of the resumes that we got, how many interviews did we schedule? Out of the ones that we scheduled, how many came? Out of the ones that came, how many do we hire? And then once you know your baseline, then you can adjust those things up or down to get it to, once you know A, you know X, right? And so I see over and over and over again, even multi-million-dollar businesses that don't have an adequate handle on their numbers. And I just think that I know that that's such an important part of closing the gap or fixing areas in your business that aren't where they should be. And our perception of how things are versus reality is almost always completely wrong. And I think that's another important thing to know too, is, when I asked our leadership, why are we down 11 beds? The answer was, we're not getting as many referrals, or our referrals aren't as good, or the patients that we're getting referred have more problems than normal, or it's just this time of year that this is the way that it was. And they believed those things to be true. And so that their perception was their reality. But when we really started tracking the things, we were actually getting more referrals than we were before, but their perception was we were getting less. The real problem was we were 6 weeks behind on assessments. And so by the time we got to assess the patient, the only patients that were left to assess were the ones that no one else wanted. And so their model of these are the patients that we don't want. While that was kind of accurate, the reason why it was that way was because of a breakdown in the assembly line earlier on. And had we not tracked that, I would have bought into their world, and then we, you know what I mean? Am I making sense of that?
Yes, understood. Yep. So you talked about then the modeling and the metrics. So what are the other two pillars?
Sure. Number 3 is mindset. And I believe, and I've proven this over and over again in my life, 80% of success in anything is psychological and 20% is mechanics. And that doesn't mean that the right mechanics will get us to the finish line 10 years faster. We have to have mechanics. But the mindset behind it is what drives, in my opinion, success in all entrepreneurs. And with the clients that I work with, they call, revenue's down this month. This is anytime that there's a problem, I always go back to their belief structure, their mindset, how they're approaching the situation. Because if they believe that business goes down in the summertime, I can promise you that business is going to go down in the summertime. We create the reality that we experience in our mind. And I don't mean to sound like hokey or gimmicky or pie in the sky with that, but I see it over and over and over again. And so when I'm working with myself or people, when results start to change, I don't always buy into, oh, it's winter or it's summer or it's this or it's that. I almost always go back to the entrepreneur and like, what is their current view map of the world? What's their current view of the world? How do they see the situation? And what are some different ways to see it? We have a live event business. And when COVID hit, we couldn't do live events. And that's the entire revenue base for that company. And so when we sat down as a team, I said, let's ask better questions and maybe we'll get some better answers. How can we serve more people, change more lives, help more people without doing live events than we ever did with doing live events? And it was a question that we had never asked because we didn't have to. And so instead of focusing on the fact that we couldn't do live events and business is down and this is just the way it is, we changed our mindset. We asked better questions. How can we reach more people without doing live events than we ever did doing live events? And I encourage anybody listening to, wherever your problems lie, let's think of some better questions. How can we overcome this? How can we do this in a different way? What other options do we have? And brainstorm those things and kick those ideas around. But mindset, such an important thing. When we're stressed out, overwhelmed, beat down, aggravated, frustrated, when we're experiencing any of those emotions, we show up as a different person. We show up different to our team. We show up different to our customers. We show up different to our coworkers, to everyone around us. And, I don't necessarily feel like making a sales call if I had a bad day or I just got a $50,000 tax bill from the IRS or any of those things that change our emotional state. What I have found is the top 1% of income earners in the world, one of the top things that they all have in common is the ability to manage their own emotional state. Recognizing that I'm not in a great state right now. What can I do to change my state back into I can accomplish anything. I can bulldoze through anything. The solution always finds me. We always overcome and accomplish. Like, how can I get back to that state? And if we can train ourselves to go from a mediocre state to a peak state in the moment that we need to, our results change, our influence changes, our impact changes, all of it changes. The last pillar is mentor. And I'm a big fan of, I think if you watched any of it, you saw every single one of the best athletes in the world have multiple coaches, multiple mentors, multiple people from the outside looking in. And it's always easier for somebody that's outside the situation to look at the situation and see what's wrong. And if you don't have that feedback, sometimes you get lost in the forest. You can't see the trees through the forest. And having somebody, and when I say mentor, I don't just mean a mentor that you found on Facebook that's selling education or something. I mean, find somebody that's already achieving the result that you're trying to achieve at a very high level. Find somebody that's actively doing it, not somebody that's just necessarily teaching it, but somebody that's actually doing it. And that's always been my rule for hiring a mentor, is like, not saying that somebody teaching a class can't give me the answers, but I have found that somebody that's actually getting the result that I'm trying to get can very often quickly see where I'm at and where I need to go. And again, one of the biggest mistakes that the 90% that are failing are making, they're saying that someday when I have enough money or have enough success or have enough results, then I'll hire a mentor. Successful business owners hire the mentor before they ever even start the business. And when I got into the assisted living space, before we ever closed on it, we put it under contract. We had a 6-month window to close. Before I ever even owned that business, I hired a super expensive mentor. The guy was the number one Medicaid, Medicare biller in the state of Missouri. I found him through a friend of a friend. I offered him a pretty significant 5-figure chunk of change for a couple hours of consulting time to say, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm trying to go. How can I bridge the gap? Feed into me, because I don't want to spend the next 5 years and millions of dollars trying to figure it out. This guy can give me the answer right now. And so a good mentor doesn't cost you money. A good mentor saves you money and earns you money. One thing that he shared with me on that 1-hour call was that Medicaid rates were negotiable. And I figured that if the same surgeon is going to do a knee surgery for you and the same surgeon is going to do a knee surgery for me, and it's the exact same surgery, it should be the same price. I didn't know that Medicaid might pay $10,000 for your knee surgery, but only $5,000 for mine because you asked them to pay more. And so when we put that building under contract, we were $3,075 per bed per month. And by the time that we closed, we had negotiated it up to $3,900 per bed per month, a difference of $90,000 per month in additional revenue from that one conversation. Things like that.
Right.
We don't know what we don't know sometimes.
That's true. Right. And like I said, I mean, it is important to have those mentors and finding, who can help. And it takes time sometimes, like you said, not just finding the first person that comes along or something too, but following those 4 pillars that you talked about definitely, would be helpful. So I'm glad that you were able to talk about that today. I do know we are coming close to the time that we have together. So I would love to ask if you have an offer that you would like to share and how our listeners can connect with you if they want more information.
So the first thing that I wanted to do is just give one rule of business for me is always give something of value before you ask for anything in return. And that's just served me well. And so I have a 16-week training that I run entrepreneurs through on mindset and business. And I consolidated it into about 2 hours. And I just wanted to give that away as a gift for completely free to your audience. There's no sales funnel. There's none of that. It's just a gift to you guys. I want you to download it, listen to it, and start to implement some of those things in your life. It's a 24-year reconciliation of what works and what doesn't work for me. And you can download that for free. Go to www.ultimatesuccessblueprint.com. All you have to do is put in your name and information, click the button, and it'll instantly email that to you. So first and foremost, if you don't do anything else, do that. It's my gift to you. Second thing, if there's anything I can do to help you or your business or life or anything like that, my website's www.jasonroberts.tv. T as in Tom, V as in Victor, not .com.tv.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Jason, for being a guest on my show and talking with me on this topic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That went fast. That was good. Thank you.
And to the listener, I hope you found this topic informative. And if you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guests and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.